Who just joined. We are going to get started in 1 minute. Welcome. Thank you so much for all the activity in the chat box. Good morning, Leighton. Good morning, Laith. Christy, thank you so much, everyone, for introducing yourselves. We're going to give it 1 more minute before we get kicked off. So introduce yourself in the chat and then we'll start. Hi, Lydia. Hi, Yana or Jana, Chuck. Welcome, everyone. So if you've just joined us, we are going to get kicked off now. We're at 5 minutes past the hour. This is Laura Bueller dialing in live from Oakland, California. I'm the executive director here at C100, and our whole team is on the line supporting you today. I want to just thank you so much for choosing to spend your morning, if you're on the West Coast, or your lunch hour, if you're on the East Coast, with C100 and an opportunity to learn something new and build some community. So thank you so much. C100, if you are new to us, is a member-supported nonprofit organization headquartered in San Francisco, California. We have members across all the major technology hubs, US, Canada, and beyond. C100 aspires to be the preeminent global community of Canadians in tech. So our speakers today are all Canadian, though they're based all over the place. And our members are committed to supporting, inspiring, and connecting the most promising Canadian entrepreneurial leaders through mentorship, investment, and talent. Our members, who are both individuals and organizations, include some of the most ambitious Canadian founders, operators, and VCs. If that sounds like you and you're interested in supporting our mission as a member and participating in our in-person members program when COVID pandemic is behind us, of course, please do head to the C100 website and consider applying to join as a member. It really supports our work and our unique role in the broader Canadian ecosystem. But more importantly, it will be invested right back into supporting you, the entrepreneurial Canadian, having a real impact in your field. Today, it's our honor to host one of C100's charter members, Mark Sochan, alongside 2 luminaries in the channel ecosystem, Sunir Shah and Bill Lipsin. We will be recording today's session. So already I've gotten a couple of questions for that in the chat. So fear not, we will be recording today's session. If you missed the last 3, they are available on the C100 website at thec100.org. We discussed the theme Startup Playbook in a Sudden Downturn, with specific roundtable discussions focused on access to capital, adapting your business plan for recession times, and team crisis management. Today's conversation is directed specifically at founders and sales leaders. We hope it is useful for you. If you've just arrived, once again, please introduce yourself in the chat. But after that point, I'm going to direct you to the Q&A. So the Q&A is a different bubble at the bottom of your screen. And if you can, please do put questions into the Q&A bubble throughout the discussion. The C100 team then will be helping to moderate and curate those questions for the session. If your question is called, we will unmute you, ask that you announce your name and your firm, say where you're calling in from, and help to keep things moving by reading your question as shortly and sweetly as you wrote it. Thank you so much in advance. We also have taken a liking to the feature that allows you to vote up questions. And so if someone else has asked a question that's on your mind, feel free to vote it up, and we will do our best to prioritize those questions if they haven't been answered already. So I'm going to turn it over to our moderator today and our panelists. Before I do so, I'm going to introduce them. So I already mentioned Mark Sochan is a C100 charter member. He's a managing director at CEO Quest. Mark, who for 25 years has successfully managed hundreds of strategic partnering initiatives, mergers and acquisitions, and he's grown revenue for clients ranging from SAP to Microsoft to Cisco, VMware, and the list goes on. Mark's unique gift is his experience on both sides of the table with an ability to successfully manage complex partner relationships. Mark literally wrote the book on strategic partnering. His book is called The Art of Strategic Partnering, Dancing with the Elephants. And we've invited him in to speak with our group today because we know there are a lot of founders of early stage companies on the line or founding teams. And we know that you're looking to partner largely with companies that are bigger than you, and that is Mark's specialty. The panelists we have with us today, the first I'm going to introduce is Sunir Shah. Sunir is based in Toronto. He's the CEO of a startup called AppBind. Sunir loves SaaS partnerships. He thinks possibly too much. Sunir is the CEO of AppBind, which I mentioned, which is bringing SaaS to the massive reseller market. Sunir is also the president of the Cloud Software Association, which is a network of over 3,000 SaaS partnership leaders. He's the conference chair of SaaS Connect and the SaaS Partnership Conference. So this is an area that he has committed his whole career to. My other panelist today is Bill Lipsin. Bill Lipsin is a Bay Area-based Canadian. He is currently the Global VP of Channels at Cohesity. He has more than 30 years of enterprise channel, sales, and marketing experience. At Cohesity, he leads the company's go-to-market strategy, channel programs, enablement, and distribution channels. Previously, he was a senior partner at the Spur Group, which is a consulting firm helping companies optimize channels, end user sales, and business operations to rapidly increase revenues. Prior to joining the Spur Group, Bill was the VP of Worldwide Channels at NetApp. So needless to say, we have the channel ecosystem very well represented here. I'm going to turn it over to Mark to kick us off today. And Mark, one thing I didn't ask or didn't mention in your bio is, of course, where you grew up in Canada. If you could just tell everybody where you're from and where you're calling in from today, and then kick us off.
Well, I'm calling from sunny Gilroy, California, the south end of the San Francisco Bay Area. And I was born and grew up in Sarnia, Ontario, and went to school at University of Waterloo and was actually the first graduating class of computer engineers from the University of Waterloo. Unlike a lot of my friends who wanted to live and die in sight of the CN Tower, I always had an urge to move west, so I started my career in Vancouver, Canada. And after 11 years in Vancouver, settled in the Silicon Valley Bay Area, where I've been living and working for the last 20 years. Maybe I'll turn it over to Bill Lipsin and Sunir Shah. You guys can introduce where you're from as well.
I think since you said Bill Lipsin first, I'll jump in. And I was born in Vancouver, but I worked for IBM for over a dozen years. So I ended up living in Calgary, Winnipeg, and a few times in Toronto, which is where my kids were both born. But at one point, I ended up running a software startup company. And just before we filed our S1 to do an IPO at NASDAQ, my investors encouraged me to move down to the Bay Area. So I've been here for 22 years, and after selling that company and then running a publicly traded software company, I got back into the corporate world, and as Laura mentioned, primarily in the channel side of the business. Over to you, Sunir.
Hi, I'm Sunir. I live here in Toronto. I went to school at Carleton and from the Ottawa Valley originally, and maybe by the end of this call, I'll slip into my Ottawa Valley accent, but I do my best American impression when I'm on phone calls, so we'll see how it goes. I started the marketing team, but really ran the partnership team at FreshBooks here in Toronto, the online invoicing service. That's where I got my taste for the SaaS partnership world, and I really loved it, and I really fell in love with it. That's where I created the Trade Association, the Cloud Software Association. For those of us who don't want to live in the Valley, such as myself, but need to stay connected to the entire network of SaaS software companies in order to be a partnership role, this is why we created it. It's just not just me, there's lots of people in the same position. So you're encouraged to join, it's free, and the only price is you buy drinks occasionally when we get back to doing that for each other, cloudsoftwareassociation.com.
Well, thank you, Sunir, and thank you, Bill. And I want to make a special thank you to Laura and Megan from C100. I was really inspired by the earlier sessions, the earlier playbooks that have been conducted, these virtual roundtables over the past month. I think they've been excellent. I hope everyone finds the same kind of value in this one. The theme that we came up with for this virtual roundtable is a playbook for building, managing, and leveraging a strategic partner and channel ecosystem. And in particular, what I'd like to do here with the help of the panelists and hopefully from the Q&A session afterwards is I'd like to make the case for why you need a partner and channel ecosystem now, or you will not be competitive, and specifically why now, even in the midst of this economic uncertainty, why now is a great time to build out the foundational elements of your business and plan your strategy and begin the steps of building out a partner and channel ecosystem, especially since typically that takes 6, 9, or 12 months, and so you can do these foundational elements and then be ready to really accelerate your company growth as the market turns around. It's my belief that most CEOs and executives I've talked to know that building out a world-class partner ecosystem is critical to success. But I found that there's a lot of confusion about, the different kinds of partners, what kind of partners should you be looking for, how do you measure success at partnering, and, even I've had questions of, Mark, when should I start partnering? Maybe that's just something for when you become a big company. And there's a quote that I wanted to share with you. It was listed in one of the chapters of my book, and it's by Sun Tzu, the author of The Art of War. And the quote is, "If you do not seek out allies and helpers, then you will be isolated and weak." And so I thought that was a great quote to get us started here. Just very quickly, because partnering is such a big, complex topic, I thought we'd do a quick partner and channel sales one-on-one so we're all using the same terminology. And a lot of times people think of partnerships as revenue-generating partnerships, and that's certainly one very important part of the partner ecosystem, what I call channel partnerships. But then there's also product partnerships. That's where you might partner with other product companies, such as Microsoft or Google and Facebook. And then there's an element of strategic versus tactical. And so, my belief is always that I define a strategic partnership as a partner that can create a 10x, has the potential to create a 10x bump in valuation for your company, because they can help you with increase in your brand, help you with credibility and market access, access to a customer base, help you with sales channels to the customer, and ultimately, for a lot of startups, the goal is an exit, whether it's an acquisition or whether it's an IPO. But partnerships, the right kind of partnerships, and especially strategic partnerships, ones that are really creating that 10x value, can create pathways to exit. I'm going to turn it over to Bill here. And Bill, can you give us some definitions and examples of partnerships that you created in your career that have really created big value for the companies that you work with?
Mark, let me start maybe from what I introduced myself with, which was just before we filed our IPO paperwork with NASDAQ. One of the things that we had to do was prepare for the roadshow. And during that roadshow, what you're looking for is how do you catch an investor's attention and, more importantly, their money. Having channels and product relationships, product partnerships was a key area that the investors were looking for, because it showed we had the ability to scale beyond hiring more of our own salespeople and doing things just by ourselves. And I don't think I fully appreciated that when we originally started that level of strategy. And we never truly got the returns, which then leads me back to your point about channels. To make sure that you are leveraging your partnering, it all starts with the customer. Understand what it is they buy and how they like to buy and who they like to buy from. And if you start from the outside in, from the customer back into the company, that starts to help you determine what types of partnerships do you need. Is it a product partnership where you leverage an OEM type relationship? Is it a brand type partnership where you're now associated with a bigger name? Or is it a traditional channel partnership that gives you more scale to go after customers and specifically the customers you're targeting. Pass it back to you.
Well, thanks, Bill. And Sunir, can you share with us kind of your partner framework and some specific examples where you've seen partnerships really make a significant impact on companies you've been involved with?
Yeah, why don't I just tell the FreshBooks story and how I started there. So if a lot of people don't know, I'm sure Mike would be very happy when I tell the secrets, but the original name of FreshBooks was SecondSight.biz, which is a terrible URL. And his idea was to build an entire like end-to-end system to run an agency back end. And there certainly have been companies who tried to do that. But what we found was that it was too much cookie to eat. It was too much product to build first. And second, the customers that liked FreshBooks were really focused on getting paid. It was very clear when we started. And so we got really focused down the path of making them successful in billing and towards payments and being successful on the accounting side of FreshBooks. But that means there's a lot of the product that we didn't build. But what we found was first partnering and doing integrations with other products was not only helping us build out the complete solution for these businesses so they become successful as agencies in the digital environment, but also these became really great acquisition channels for us as well. And when I looked at the statistics coming back from our integration program, you know, and I scaled that very quickly and very cheaply while it was there, we can talk about that. But the like 1/3 of our customers identified our integrations as their number one reason they pick FreshBooks over the other products. 1/3 of them installed integration within like 2 days of some kind. We had like over 20% of our revenue was coming from our partner channel when I was there running it. It was pretty significant, and it gave us a competitive advantage that a lot of our partners our competitors who did not have an integration partner-centric, partner-positive strategy, they just could never compete with us because we ended up solving too many problems for the customer by working with so many other products in a positive way, integrating them and working with them to sell together. And that was a big, big advantage that we had.
And if I could share another success partnership story from my career, first company I started working for was a company called Crystal Decisions in Vancouver, Canada. And we came up with this innovative product called a report writer, which no one surprisingly at that time knew what the heck a report writer was. And we were pretty small. We were 20 people, 20 employees, and we didn't have a lot of money for sales and marketing. And so we sat down and we thought, well, how can we raise our brand? How could we get some market credibility? How could we really get distribution to our intended target customer base, which were largely developers and builders of applications? And so the idea that came up with is that if we could bundle our report writer with every copy of Microsoft Visual Basic, which is a rapid development tool, then that would be a great way to have instant credibility with the market, that we had a world-class report writer, and we would leverage the brand from Microsoft. We'd leverage Microsoft's huge channel ecosystem and routes to distribution. And so in getting that deal, getting that agreement from Microsoft to bundle, led to a tremendous increase in sales of our report writer, instant credibility of what a report writer should look like in terms of features. And ultimately, it created a pathway to exit where we got acquired because of that brand value. We didn't get acquired by Microsoft, by the way. We got acquired by another company, Seagate Technology, who wanted that report writing strategy as part of their company. So maybe the next question, I'll turn it over, is how do you know what kind of partners to go after? I mean, we've talked about channel partners, we've talked about product partners. There's also global system integrators, GSIs, VARs, resellers. Bill, can you tell us about, what kind of partnerships? How can a company determine what's the right mix of partnerships that they should be looking after? And maybe can you also share with us, how do you understand what value you have to that company? So it's a balanced value exchange, if you will.
Important.
Bill, I think you're on mute. There we go.
Nope, I think I'm off. And those are two very important and distinct questions you asked. First of all, how do you determine which types of partnerships to go after? Well, once again, it starts with the customer. Which customers are you trying to target? How do they like to buy? And then determine from there which partners are their most preferred method of buying. And I'll give you an example. For example, in large enterprise customers in the US in the banking system, there's a few key channel partners such as a Worldwide Technology or a Presidio, who are the default partners that most of the banks use. If that's the kind of customer you're trying to target, then you want to make sure you've got a Worldwide Technology and a Presidio on your dance card. But in order to make that happen, now you've got some real challenges. I think WWT is a $13 billion company. And so how do you become relevant to that organization? The key here is making sure you have a very strong value proposition. What does it mean to the channel partner for them to want to work with you? And then tied to that as well is what's the value proposition that you need that channel partner to bring to the table? So as Sunir said, you can do a lot of this yourself to a certain extent, but you're never going to scale. Never expect a channel to be a market maker. They're an accelerator. So how do you leverage their investments, their capabilities, their relationships to make sure that you can now become a part of a bigger puzzle? I'll just give you a quick example for cohesivity. For every $1 million of software we sell, it has a 4+ times drag on Cisco hardware. Now, coincidentally, Worldwide Technology and Presidio are two of Cisco's largest partners. If we can drag more of their hardware, which is they've already built an engine around in their sales and systems engineering sides, that's a natural motion and sales play for Worldwide Technology or Presidio. That's the way you start to define both your partnerships, the value proposition you bring to the table, and then how you can use their value to make sure you address the customer opportunities.
So that value proposition, I think, is so important because, you know, when I've seen successful partnerships versus the failed partnerships, the ones that aren't successful, it's almost always because there's a mismatch in expectations and because there wasn't enough discussion up front to really understand and call out what were the expectations and needs from both sides. Sunir, can you tell us about some success examples you have about what kind of partnerships to go after, what made them successful?
Yeah, so I have this process now that I developed while at FreshBooks because we're going crazy trying to figure out which partners to focus on there. And then after I left FreshBooks, I did OLARC, and then I did some consulting similarly. And this process really helped, and I'm going to share it with you. What happens if you don't make a plan is that you'll be dragged around by your nose by whatever the latest shiny object is, and you end up whipping around. And the problem with partners is that they don't necessarily pan out. They're all risks and bets, and you're going to have to play an expected value game, just like sales. You have to try running a program against the same kind of partner multiple times in order to get a predictable result. It's the same as sales. That's how predictable revenue works. But the only way you can do that efficiently is not just making one-off partnerships every single time, because they're all different. And so what we did, what really worked, is we got everyone around a table and we took index cards. We played a game called, I like to call Marketing Risk. And if you email me, sunir@appmind.com, I'll send you my little guidebook for doing this. But basically, if you play the game Risk, it's basically like that. So we started brainstorming every kind of partnership around us. It could be a product partnership, it could be an agency implementation partner, it could be in a brand partnership. And the more you can do it customer-centric, like from the customer's mindset out, like where they look for information and those partners they would work with, like those being your partners, the better, because that's where it all really comes down to the customer. So we just started brainstorming these index cards. And after 20 minutes, you got everyone who's a stakeholder in the company dumping out of their head. These cards become like countries. You can organize the countries into continents. The continents arrange themselves on a map. And you have a map of the territory of your partnerships. And you'll naturally know where your strengths and weaknesses are as a company against that map. But suddenly you can see it as a team. And then that helps you understand where you can focus your most amount of energy to run the same kind of partnership program against multiple kinds of partners, whether it's a agency program to are going to be your channel program, or an integration program against the same kinds of products. So you can only build one set of APIs and run that integration program over and over again. That's the only way you can place multiple bets against the same kind of partner, and therefore control your results a little bit better and learn from each partnership. Oh, you're muted, Mark.
Hello, now I'm unmuted. Thank you. Thanks, Sunir. Those are some great insights, because one of the exercises I run with the companies I work with is I do a top 10 strategic partner ranking. And to get to your top 10, I say there's 3 dimensions you should look at. First is, what's the value that you bring to every one of those partners that you aspire to talk to and to have a partnership with? The second is to look from their point of view is, how much do they need your stuff? I mean, if they just made an acquisition of your competitor, I'd say you don't have a whole lot of good chances to partner with that company. And then the third dimension is, how difficult, to assess on a scale of 1 to 10, how difficult would it be to do that deal? Oracle, for example, typically is more challenging to partner with because they have a more of a do-it-yourself, build-it-yourself kind of philosophy. So trying to get an OEM partnership or a product partnership with Oracle might be a whole lot more difficult than, say, with a Microsoft. So knowing and understand those factors, I think, is really important. One of the other things that Sunir and Bill, that you made me think of as you were speaking, is that I always ask CEOs, I say, what's the right number of partnerships you should have? And I always say it's any number except for 1, because especially when you're partnering with the titan of your industry, you have a real power imbalance that isn't good. And that's where a lot of partnerships, especially with the elephants of your industry, go sideways because you're misaligned. But if you then can partner with the elephant's competitors, and you've now got partnerships with Microsoft, IBM, SAP, Salesforce, then suddenly you've neutralized and equalized the power distribution.
Hey, Mark, I think
yes.
You and Sunir just made a very key point. As you're looking at partnerships, you have to look at segmentation. To your last point, who are the must-wins, both from an offensive side, those who can accelerate your business, but also from a defensive position, making sure that your competition is not getting that unfair advantage that you want to have by partnering with someone that you really have to have on your team. So segmentation, I think, is an important point you two both just raised.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. I think that's right. Segmentation is very important to understand and create a smart partner ecosystem. Another topic that I wanted to cover off is the timing of starting a partnership. Some people say, you don't want to start too early. You should wait till you're at least, $100 million of revenue potential. I've always taken a different approach, at least on the product partnerships, those big OEM type partnerships with the titans. I've always counseled CEOs to say, look, how would you feel if partner X, let's call it Google, you opened up your inbox the next day and your number 1 competitor just announced a partnership with Google or Salesforce. If that creates a real gut punch in your stomach, then that means that was an opportunity that you missed. And that's the reason I think that, especially for product partnerships, the earlier you can get in front and be at the table for those strategic partnering decisions, even if you decide not to pursue the partnership, at least you will have learned a whole lot about what the big guys are doing, which might help you inform you on your direction and your product roadmap. Sunir, can you give me an example of when's the right time to partner and some success examples that you've seen?
Yeah, actually, I have a lot of stories about this, like too many, both personally and through.
Okay, just 1 or 2.
Yeah. So one, you can definitely get excited by a big partner And I got, I'm a big Intuit fan. I thought I could do a partnership with Intuit when I was at FreshBooks. I worked on that deal so long. I even left FreshBooks and was continuing working on that deal afterwards because we kept talking about it even after I was gone. That was a crazy idea because I wanted a feather in my cap. That happens a lot, actually. You have this big shiny partner. They think there's going to be they're so big, they're going to make my company. And you spend overinvest too much time. They will never do a deal with you. No big company will until you basically force that function because customers are demanding it, right? When is the right time to do a partnership? You could be a tiny company, it could be pre-launch. You could do a partnership then. You could do it, it could be $100 million. A lot of us find our way into partnerships one way or the other. But when the certainty around your customer gets high that, hey, I understand the ecosystem the customer lives in, because after all, it all comes from the customer. You're not alone in the customer's life. There's other companies around them as well. When the certainty around the customer gets high, you start knowing there's going to be partners you have to go working with in order to sell a complete solution to that customer. That's the time to do a partnership. And that can be before you even launched a product. You may already know that you have to integrate with Slack or Facebook if you're paying a Slack bot or Facebook Messenger bot. You're going to have to talk to them, right? We could be, if you're dealing with Oracle, you may have to be, a $1 billion company before Oracle talks to you because that's the kind of scale they deal with. It just becomes down to a level of certainty around the customer. And that's when you can get the partner to listen to you because they have the same understanding of their customer too.
Bill, anything else that you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think I'd just reinforce what the two of you are at least alluding to if you haven't actually said it overtly. These things take time. And as Sunir said, not only do they take time, but if you don't do it properly and you don't do it with the right partner, it can be a sinkhole of time. You can waste your time. A larger company has a lot more resources to invest in this area than most of the companies that we're talking to on this call. And so you've got to be very selective as to which partners you're going to go with. Some may actually provide a yield faster than others. Some can take forever and never provide you the return that you're expecting. So you do have to make sure that you have both an appetite to have the patience and the right timing, but also ensure that you have the ability to invest your funds as well for some of this exercise.
Okay. Well, I'm seeing that we're getting close to the Q&A time, and we got some really great questions in the Q&A chat session box. Bill, Sunir, any closing messages that you want to leave with the audience here before we shift into the Q&A? What's the key takeaways you'd like people to remember? Three points, and I'm probably just some of it's just reinforcing what I've already said. First of all, start with the customer. Determine how you're going to make sure that you're going to penetrate your targeted customer segment as effectively as possible by leveraging partnerships. Secondly, have a clear value proposition to your partners, why they want to work with you, and from your partners to the customers. What value are you expecting them to bring to the customers, and what value are they expecting you to bring to the table? And the third one really gets back to the last statement we were just talking about. We're going to require an investment of time and resources and money on your side. Make sure you properly scope that and you have the right individuals that can deliver on that. This can't be their first rodeo. They should have experience and relationships with your targeted partners. Pass it back to you. Sunir?
Yeah, I want to build on Bill's point about execution. If you can't execute on a partnership, that is a bad sign. You don't do it. Because what happens, the point I want to emphasize is that your partners are basically the same as you, but they act weirdly because what every partnership person does is they're betting on you, which is a lot of risk. They're betting their company's resources, time, engineer, resource, money on you to get a result that you may not deliver. And so they're terrified of you. And a lot of times we'll find in partnership deals, especially with unexperienced partnership people, as they learn negotiation from movies, they play poker, they act weird. They might fade out on the other side without talking to you, without communicating. It's like any relationship. Communication is key. Being straightforward is important. Be empathetic to the other person's fear about you because they are taking a bet on you, and make sure you're reliable, and make sure you talk and listen to your partners, understand the world from their point of view because they're not you. It's something I've learned deeply now that I'm in the reseller channel with AppBind. A lot of SaaS companies don't really talk with their channel partners who are trying to sell their stuff to their customers. They don't understand their needs. And now that I've been deep into with AppBind and solving that problem, I understand there is actually a disconnect between both sides of the table. And that's something easy for you to fix. It's just open your ears more and talk more to your partners and treat them as people who are afraid, just as you are.
Okay. And one quick takeaway I'll leave for people before I turn it over to Laura for the Q&A is partner with the biggest guys in the industry, especially on the product partnership side. I see a lot of startups making the mistake where they partner with other small startups, and 0.5 plus 0.5 just doesn't add up to a whole lot. I've always said it takes just about as much work to do a partnership with one of the elephants in your industry, and the rewards are way bigger in terms of credibility, market leverage, access to customer base. And ultimately, on the strategic product partnership side, I've seen in my career, every exit I've been involved with in terms of an M&A acquisition was a result of a strong strategic partnering strategy. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Laura to help walk us through the Q&A.
Yeah, thank you so much for that to both of our panelists and to you, Mark, for moderating. We've got some great questions. Our first question is going to go over to Ron Piovison, who is a C100 charter member. Ron, we're going to unmute you so that you can ask your question. And I believe it's directed to Sunir, but you can.
Great conversation. Thanks very much for putting this together, Laura, and thanks to the panelists for spending some time with us. The question I have is actually about how to think about revenue from other integration or product partnerships. The revenue opportunity from a VAR and a channel, I think, is pretty well understood, but I think increasingly companies are trying to drive revenue through one of their integration or product partnerships. And that could be through an OEM, or it could be through a different model. And I would wonder if the panelists have any thoughts on driving revenue through an integration or a product partnership. Thanks.
I can answer this. So I find that a lot of people make these things too complicated, but it's really simple. Every SaaS company, I live in SaaS subscriptions, there's the pirate metrics. I like to use those. There are really only 3 dimensions that a partnership will hit on. One is demand, so new customers coming in through the door, and that's probably the most important thing from integration is net flow of customers. I like to say customers follow the data, and data, is the point of the integration. So that's number 1. Number 2 is revenue. So if you have an OEM deal where you're doing upsell or cross-sell, that is a good place to get extra revenue. That's more in bundling or OEMing, or basically embedding complementary products. And the third is, which is harder to track, but you need to do some work on here, is the adoption retention coming from integrations. That one's been the hardest one to track like scientifically, because there's a causation correlation problem there. But do your best to show like how many of your customers are using an integration, how quickly they use the integration, how many in the sign-up survey would say, how did you hear about us from an integration, or why did they buy you because of integrations? That should be moving up over time because the quality of your integration program is improving. And that is, you will see the dividends from that, because you'll have a stickier, more competitive product. Did that answer your question?
Let me just add to that, because we've OEM'd with both Cisco and HPE. Both have their own standard methodologies. One's got a profit share, one has, as Sunir suggested, here's what we're going to buy the product from you for, and here's how we're going to resell it. You may find yourself in 2 different negotiation times, though. When you first get in the door, you don't have the leverage that you'd like to have. But once you start seeing the traction in terms of number of customers and the revenue that you're generating together, now you can potentially go back and renegotiate. So I don't think it's ever a static revenue model. There's a few different paths you can follow. And then even once you start down one path, you may have the opportunity to go back and renegotiate. And Mark, that's probably your area of specialty as well.
Yeah, I would add that when you're partnering on a product side, it's really pretty well defined. They're going to put you first into their marketplace, pure integration certification, which is kind of the baseline checkoff. And then from there, you're trying to move up the value chain which, by the way, there's some handouts afterwards that describe a lot of this terminology and recap some of these concepts. You're trying to move up the value chain, and it might be referrals and compensation for some lead referrals. Above that would be to get on their price list, and above that would be to actually integrated and embedded in their product. So just quickly, those are the kind of different elements that I would see.
Great, thank you.
I want to make sure we got time for other questions.
Yeah, we probably, I mean, those were great. My guess is that not all three of you will need to answer every one of these questions, but we'll see. The next question is from Rahim Nathu. And so I'm going to ask, I didn't do a good enough job of this with you, Ron. If you could just say your name and where you're calling in from, and the startup that you work at before you introduce your question. So Rahim Nathu, you're next.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep, perfect. Thank you so much for making this webinar happen, or live Q&A happen. My question is specifically with the life sciences, you know, and obviously within that sector, partnerships are key, especially for exits, but because a lot of the players are big players, we're always struggling with when do we start initiating that first contact, and where do we go? How does that relationship develop, and you know, how best to kind of work through that whole process?
Well, if I could take a lead on that, I get asked all the time, when is the right time to start a partnership discussion? You know, is there a time where it's too early? I've always encouraged CEOs to talk as early as you can to the big influencers in your industry. And the reason for that is twofold. One is, if you're not at the table talking to them, you're not going to learn where they're going and how you might need to understand what's valuable to them, and therefore how you might need to adjust your value proposition. The second, and really honestly the biggest risk you have, is if you're not talking to those big leaders in the industry, I guarantee you one of your competitors is talking to them, and that just really puts you at a huge disadvantage.
Thanks, Mark. So let's move on to Sean Lando.
Hi, thanks, Laura, and thank you everyone for being on the panel. I had two questions, but I'll just throw it to one. They're more around the downside of partnerships, because we all, being entrepreneurs, are optimistic about the upside. What are the biggest lessons you've learned from downside of partnerships? And I'm asking specifically, and I might direct this to Sunir, because you went pretty wide with FreshBooks. Did you, for example, piss off some of your earlier partners by taking away their market share potential as they grew, rather than going deep? So that's the question.
Okay, first, I've pissed off a lot of people, and since I do it professionally, we usually drink beers, and they join the trade association and later keynote at my conference. So you don't have, even if you're pissing someone off on a business level, and you can give them hard feedback, do it with love, like try to help them with their business. Like if they made a mistake or it's not working, be honest, straightforward, try honestly to put them on a ladder to success with you even later on. Just like, this doesn't work, if you can fix it, we'll bring you back on. They'll respect you more for that. So don't worry about pissing people off. I definitely am strongly in the quantity over quality dimension of partnerships. There's a huge argument inside partnership land about this, but I went with fill and kill as my partnership strategy because I realized that it was a game of bets that I couldn't control. I didn't know a lot about my partners. And also I wanted, my actual secret strategy was logos everywhere. I wanted the FreshBooks logo and name in every possible place a customer could possibly look for information about something in FreshBooks, which is an extremely successful strategy. And I think you should, if you can afford to do it, do it. But I've been surprised so many times about the partners I thought would deliver big results did not. And the partners I had no idea who they were. Podio is my favorite example from Scandinavia. I crushed it. They sent us so many customers. I had no idea who these people were because you just don't know anything. So I just like, if I can handle it, I can onboard them and they meet some level of quality control, I will let them go. And I try to do and we built resources and programs so we can operate efficiently, so we can give everyone something from us. And we're very good at launching partners as well, that they would always get some positive result from working with us. and they would talk to our partners. You have to work with FreshBooks. If you do that, and well, you'll get a lot of partners, and then you'll see who's good and who's bad, who treats you well, who doesn't treat you well, and then you can talk to them, and trying to improve your partner base systematically so you get better results rather than knocking them out because they didn't do something for you. Try to help them succeed for you. Right? That's the way it goes.
Great,
Don't kill.
Thank you, Sunir. Okay, our next question is going over to Robert Vandenheuvel in Alberta. Robert, we're finding you to unmute you. Oh, we found you. Go ahead, Robert.
Hi. First of all, I want to say I'm enormously impressed that you pronounced my name correctly. So that's great.
Alberta girl.
My question has to do with
Where
motivating
are
partners.
you, tell us, before you, please introduce yourself. Tell us your startup, where you're dialing in from.
Sure. Robert Vandenheuvel. I'm the Director of Corporate Partnerships at Alta ML, which is a applied machine learning company based in Alberta, Canada.
Awesome.
So my question has to do with sort of motivating partners, and maybe Sunir has answered that with his fill and kill strategy. But in the past, I've developed some really good relationships and partnerships where there were a lot of mutual referrals, even without compensation. It was a lot of just goodwill and serving the customer. And there are other times when there are partners who love the idea in theory. They talk about partnership and mutual referrals. And I include them in, I send business their way. I include them in joint marketing campaigns, try to involve them in joint sales campaigns, all of which comes at a cost, but it's not always reciprocated. Are there strategies for encouraging this greater accountability and activity?
Oh, yes.
Who's going to take that one?
Bill, do you want to comment on that?
Well, I mean, I think there's a few things. First of all, if you want to make sure that you have your partner's attention, three basic things you have to make sure you're covering off on. How are you helping them drive revenue? How are you helping them with their profit, both their front end as well as the bottom line? And maybe as importantly as anything else, how are you helping them with their customers and your mutual customers, capturing new logos, but also penetrating the ones that they may already have in their install base? To your point though, Robert, there's all different types of tools you can use that. People very quickly, often incorrectly, jump to the conclusion that it's all about rebates and back-end financial motivation. That's not the only thing. It's a much more involved conversation as to what you're trying to do. But as long as you're driving both driving revenue, profit, and customer wins, I think you're going to catch their attention. Now you have to make sure that, as we discussed up front, you define your value proposition, your expectations, and then it's an ongoing dialogue and management conversation to make sure that you are constantly reviewing with them. Here's what we set out in terms of our expectations. Here's where we're winning. Here's where there are lessons learned. Here are the actions we need to take. It's a very tried and true formula that I've seen work over and over again. And I think to your point, we've all learned the hard way what works and doesn't work in this area.
Can I add one more thing
If
on
I could
that?
quickly chime in with one additional thought on that, is I've seen so many times where the partnership contract gets inked, everyone's doing high fives and popping open the champagne bottles, and they think that magic is going to happen. Magic never happens. It's like as soon as you sign that contract, that's where the hard work begins. And some of the best practices I've seen there, where I've seen success, is we define a business plan, a joint mutual business plan up front about how many customers we expect each side to bring, how many leads, and we track it. I have a weekly war room call with that partner. So we go through that pipeline every week. And so there's no surprises in 3 months or 6 months about like, oh, well, I thought you were going to bring me a bunch of leads. Oh, I thought you were going to bring the leads. So you avoid that just by having this regular cadence of calls with predefined targets, 3, 6, 9 months. So everyone's on the same page.
And one more thing.
Yeah.
So this happens a lot in partnership land where people get frustrated with their partners or talk about them as they're coin operated. Don't forget, their job in life is not to sell you. Their job is to sell themselves to the customer. So if you're not understanding why they need you to help them sell to their customers, your partnership will not work. The rebates and commissions only pay back the time and investment in the relationship with you. It's not the thing that's going to make or break them as a business. They have their own business. Margins are only there to cover the cost of the relationship, right? That's what you should think about. Whether it's an agency who wants to sell you, they're selling their time and expertise, or a software company, they have their own product. The margins are just there to make the relationship functioning, but they are selling something else, not you, to the customer, and they need you. Think about that.
That's great. Thank you so much. We're going to head over to Cynthia Kwang now. Cynthia?
Hey guys. Thanks everyone for doing this. This is really interesting. I just had a question about
Cynthia,
finding...
can you say, I'm sorry to interrupt you, dear. Can you please say your company and we want to know who we're talking to.
Oh, right. Sorry. Yes.
Yeah,
this is Cynthia. I'm calling from Vancouver. I'm the CEO of Altcoin Fantasy. We're a crypto trading simulation platform and game. So we try and onboard people into crypto in a fun way. So if you guys are interested in crypto, check it out. My question is, we've done a lot of partnerships in the past and with pretty good success, but I know with some of the larger companies that you want to partner with, often the success is based on finding someone who's a champion within the organization. So do you have any tips on finding that person and sort of like managing that relationship so that they actually want to go to bat for you?
Yes. So it just depends how
jump in at the same time.
Yeah, how operationalized they are on partnerships. So if they don't have a partner program, you have to go to whoever owns the customer and the business. So CEO probably, or CPO. If they already have a partner program, then they already know their framework of interacting with you. It's basically how that works. So.
I always find product managers, if a company has a product manager, that's usually rubber meets the road, where the product manager has to assess where the gaps are in the product feature set, and often is in the best position to make and champion whether this is a partnership that makes sense for them. But if it's a smaller company, for sure the CEO is not a bad starting spot, and they may refer you to other people in the organization, either in the product management or in the development organization, that might make the best sense for figuring out the opportunities.
Those are great tips. So first partner person, CEO, product manager. Could be a few depending.
Actually, I would argue the partner person is usually the last person you want to talk to, because the partner person is usually the gatekeeper, especially in larger organizations. You're trying to bypass the partner people. You're trying to get straight to the executives that can make a decision.
Interesting.
We can buy drinks.
So we're going to go, sorry?
Or you can drink with us, and then you get past the gatekeepers with their drinks at the cloud software station.
So we're going to try to get through two more real quick here. If you can introduce yourself and ask your question, it's very yeah. Awesome.
Or I couldn't hear which person it was that you're inviting to speak.
Dave Bodnarchuk. Hey, Dave.
Hi, it's Dave Bodnarchuk. I'm the president and co-founder of Election Buddy. We're a simple to set up, high integrity, cloud-based voting platform that allows member-based organizations like professional associations, homeowners associations, unions, and universities to continue to conduct their business through both remote elections as well as live vote meetings during this crazy COVID time. So we're trying to figure out how, when in this kind of environment where folks are either completely deluged with new business or doing nothing, what I know that, you know, from an entrepreneurial perspective, you can go and call high and be persistent, but do you guys have any specific tactics that you can talk about to penetrate prospective partners that might be deluged with business, for example, like these guys, Zoom? Any ideas?
Who wants to take that one?
I'll jump in first. It starts with the customer one more time. If who you're trying to partner with have their customers saying, I want to make sure I'm working with Dave, that makes all the difference in the world. Customers will drive the agenda. And just so you know, I share a board member with Zoom, and you're right, they are deluged with all types of activity right now, but still they haven't stopped some of their core business. And that means that when their customers are telling them that they want to be partnering with another company, that still stays on their list of things to do.
Okay, we're going to go to our last question here. And our last question asker has dialed in with 2 names. And so I'm going to read them both out just for the sake of Vanessa, who's helping us in the background, but also for the person calling it out. So our last question comes from either Amit Jas or from Iham Aldajane.
I'm just impressed you could do both.
Okay, I think we've got Amit. We're going to unmute one of your, you've
Hello?
got a couple devices. Yeah, we hear you. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Aham, do you want to answer this? Hi, sorry, I should introduce. My name's Amit Joss. I'm with Known. Known's, we are the first customer recognition point of sale and mobile platform in the world. We have several large clients, including Drake's clothing line, October's very own, and we're across internationally here. Our model's been channel partners is how we found our success. We've some of them you might be familiar with, global payments processing, several other processors like First Data. We then found even folks who sell hardware to our clients becoming reseller partners. We even moved towards the support people who provide IT support as becoming resellers. And we even went down to the landlord who could provide. And we sort of broke up a strategy of then devising a level 1, 2, 3 kind of thinking, where depending on how much expertise that salesperson, that reseller has in taking the customer through the sales journey, will determine how much we have to get involved and how much the commission structure has been there. With global payments, it's been about a 1.5 years start to get them up and working. And we've struggled through in that they've brought on another product that seems to be very competitive to ours, to the point that we think they might even be infringing in our patent. And so there is this sort of a frenemy type of relationship. We still see the salespeople selling us and putting us in front, but there's the top level executives that are being told like their product has to be now pushed. And we were in front of a client recently, and I guess my question here is that, or tips or ideas on how to address that. They presented our solution, but they're pushing their own solution agenda. Our solution still sort of has been winning the deals at the end of the day over their solution. We're coming down to restructuring the agreement. The agreement is coming down to renewal, and we're just looking for advice on what should we think of, how should we, questions we might ask, or things we haven't just maybe thought of on how we might want to make that relationship work if we could.
I'm afraid we actually don't have time now for the answer to that question. I'm so sorry, but I do think that we're going to be able to give you some resources afterwards, Amit. The original question was a little bit shorter than the one that you just asked. So we'll give you some resources so you can get in touch with these guys and take that up. This is a great complex question. So thank you. Look, in the meantime, I'm afraid we have to cut things off. We're losing attendees now. We're just after 10 o'clock or 1 o'clock on the East Coast. I want to thank you, 3 of you, so much for your time today. Before we go, I'd just like to tell folks that we've given a small donation to a local charity of each of their choice, a COVID-related charity, and each member of our panelist team has selected a different organization that is feeding people in their hometown. So Mark, Bill, and Sunir, thank you so much for choosing charities like that are feeding people in this very difficult time. I'm afraid we're gonna have to close off. Join us next week. We're doing this every Wednesday, and thank you all so much. If you are interested in getting more involved, you can learn more about C100 membership on our website. And we'll be sending some resources and a recording of this conversation after the call. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.